Okay, all of my editors are dying in midterms right now, so I'll be the one editing this video now. So, yeah, pain. Yeah.
Okay. Representation in media has definitely gotten better over the years, ranging from different topics like the troubles of people of color, Asian culture, or even mental health. In this episode, we will be tackling how the LGBTQ community is represented in the media and the positive and negative outcomes that come from it. This is the second part of our Pride Month special. Welcome to PsyPop. In this series, we'll be tackling how pop culture or something in pop culture has displayed a phenomenon where we can learn from it in the context of psychology and mental health. If you like this series and don't want to miss out on future episodes, don't forget to show us support by liking and subscribing. Don't forget to click on the bell icon to receive a notification whenever we post a new video. First things first, let's talk about the LGBTQ representation in media throughout the years. So, so LGBTQ youth representations in media, while positive in nature, have been given stereotypical or commonly given roles such as comic relief, villains, or criminals, mentally or physically ill, or victims of violence. And it has remained so since the 1960s all the way to contemporary times. Starting from gay liberationist movements in the 1960s, the first form of queer media criticism was based on the minority model of identity politics. Under this model, gays and lesbians were seen as being the subordinate or lower ranking to the heterosexual majority. The LGBTQ community needed to be seen as just like everyone else in the media in order to promote equality and acceptance. Minority model criticism was particularly preoccupied with not just visibility within the media, but with having the right kind of visibility. This generalization of queer stereotypes influences society to assume that all queer individuals are the same, to box them all in one category. Despite the fact that awareness on the LGBTQ community has improved over the years that followed, a new type of criticism arose. Within the LGBT community, the progress was mostly only limited to white, gay, cisgendered men. Other sexual minorities like queer people of color or people with HIV/AIDS were less socially accepted and represented. Let us now move forward in time and talk about the current LGBT representation in media. The younger generation usually relies on media as a primary source of information about their identity, including LGBTQ concepts and identities. Relying on media representation is mostly due to the lack of public LGBTQ role models, along with open access to verified information within their homes, schools, and other communities that they are constantly exposed to. Newer stereotypes have been created, such as LGBTQ characters being perceived as well educated, young, wealthy, and successful. However, they're mostly portrayed by queer men in comparison to queer women. Along with that, there still seems to be a lack of representation in other subgroups like transgenders and non binaries from various ethnicities, age groups, and religious and socioeconomic backgrounds. A very good example of what I just previously mentioned is LGBTQ Asian American identity through K-pop media and fandom. Asian Americans usually experience intersecting forms of oppression wherein they may encounter both racism and heterosexism within both the LGBTQ community and the society they live in. This is mostly due to how media representation featured LGBTQ characters as mainly white in comparison to LGBTQ characters that are of color. Overall, positive and accurate media representation of LGBTQ characters in color tends to be rare, and Asian Americans are considered a part of that minority. Another factor could be how Western culture appears to be superior to the East. As a result, gay Asian American men, for example, tend to be portrayed as feminine and passive, since whiteness and masculinity are seen as symbols of power. As of now, there aren't much studies on how Asian Americans within the LGBTQ community experience marginalization in comparison to other groups. While acknowledging the dissonance between media sourced from Western culture and directly from Asian producers, K-pop has the potential to function as a unique representation for Asian Americans because it can portray Asian identity in ways beyond the stereotypes that arise from the marginalized experiences of Asians in the United States. This opportunity is compounded by how K-pop is positioned as a mainstream genre in the US popular scene, granting it a particular level of cultural awareness. LGBTQ Asian Americans make use of K-pop, particularly K-pop idols, to explore and discover their queer identity. One of the notable examples is what's usually described as generally effeminate among men in the West has been considered as masculine by the East. This is mostly due to how K-pop male idols mostly have pretty faces, wear clothes that are sparkly or complements their slender body, and make use of makeup. However, even with this in mind, K-pop isn't considered as ideal in discovering their LGBTQ identity due to how it can be mostly focused on how male K-pop idols who can break away from the gender norms of the West, while female K-pop idols have to conform to the gender norms expected of females. Now we're going to divulge in queer fan culture, specifically Chinese-speaking queer culture. Before, in mainland China, entertainment media outputs that evidently showed homosexual themes have been heavily banned from public viewing. However, it didn't really take long before the media industry decided, you know what, let's make use of the themes and make it into shows and other media products. One good example of this is the show Go Princess Go, which was 36 episodes and it was released in December 2015. It was a show that contained a lot of boys love and girls love, as well as gender flings. Since its release, it became one of the most popular web-based TV dramas in mainland China before it was removed by the government regulators in order for the producers to revise the show due to some explicit scenes in January 2016. So, for those of you who don't know, boys love means boy to boy, and girls love is girl to girl. It's a subculture that narrates their homoeroticism. As of the current times, Chinese-speaking entertainment media industries that make use of homosexuality, cross-dressing, androgyny, and queerness have received controversial yet impacting reactions by the public audience. Using such elements not only help increase economic success, but also received support from Chinese queer-based fandoms. Studies created on the basis of Western queer fandom culture have looked into the slash have been well organized since the late 1980s. However, there seems to be a lack of analysis on non-Western queer fandom culture. In fact, only a few language-written studies have analyzed BL and GL fandom-based works, despite the global influence and popularity of Japanese BL in other countries. Chinese-speaking countries such as Taiwan, Hong Kong, and mainland China, directors have created queer-based works that aim to represent Chinese male homosexuality and fashion, female masculinity, homoeroticism, and lesbianism. China's complex media censorship regulations and how homosexuality images are vulgar and obscene for public viewing, queer-based works still remain popular among media consumers. Regardless of where we are, there is no denying how limited and how heteronormative queer representation is in the media. Let us take a look on how the LGBTQ community is portrayed in Filipino media. Stereotypes have made their way into the mainstream view of homosexuality in media. In media forms such as television shows, films, and wherever homosexuality is represented, ideas are built in a stereotypical fashion. This only deepens the viewer's inability to acknowledge and understand the queer community beyond their stereotypes. A study entitled The Heteronormative Representations of Queers in Philippine Indie Films talked about the portrayal of queer characters in Filipino independent and mainstream films to determine how it affects perception and cultural acceptance in the LGBTQ community. In most Filipino films, gay men are always associated with images of a woman and are often very interested in fashion. The same goes for lesbians portrayed in these films. They are portrayed as women that act and dress like men. In most Filipino films, gay men are always associated with images of a woman. This research also touched on 4 common depictions of the queer community. The first one is the gender stereotypes. There is a subjectivity to characters labeled as bakla, where they are often portrayed to show unusual gestures of affection and cross-dressing stereotypes. This also goes hand in hand with the GBF, or the gay best friend stereotype, where all gay men are expected to be sassy, effeminate, and loud.
Is being the gay best friend still a thing?
The second is the sexual depiction. Queer characters are often portrayed to be hypersexual people. In media, they typically show an obsession towards the same sex, pressure and pleasure of sexual acts, and physical expression of sexual intimacy. This sexual nature is a heightened trait in queer characters compared to their heterosexual counterparts, when in reality, straight individuals can be just as sexually driven. The third is the defiant aspect, or departing from usual standards. Queer individuals are usually kept as side characters, placed in films to be companions to the main characters and comedic relief to make the film more.
I believe who just propositioned me in the bathroom. To give you a hint, his name may be Moose, but I describe a certain appendage of his as horse-like.
Interesting, as they say. Because of this, viewers may not take these people seriously. They're at times seen as just commodities that provide excitement in the main character's life. And the last is the depiction of their lifestyle. Common life events depicted in a queer character story include: 1. The development of emotional attachment towards the same sex. The next is the family's upbringing as an environmental factor. Then characters experience career threats due to their homosexuality, social pressure, and family-driven pressure to start a relationship. Many characters often find themselves in a dilemma between relationship and careers, their perceived priorities in life. As you can see, these stereotypical depictions of LGBTQ plus community in films hold a lot of influence, and this makes society limited and closeted to this narrow perspective. And this makes society, keep them in a box. We need to remember that they are much more than what they are depicted as and what we see them on screen. So when media representation is done right, what are the advantages? One of the first advantages that I can tell you about having accurate LGBTQ representation is that LGBTQ representation in the media allows people to be knowledgeable towards information related to LGBTQ people. It also allows younger individuals to discover themselves, whether they are part of the LGBTQ community or based on the identity they closely relate to themselves to. The second is LGBTQ representation in mainstream media, particularly in traditional media, example television, allows to have positive depictions where LGBTQ characters are shown in a similar light to non-LGBTQ characters. The third is the rise of LGBTQ representation in media allows a rise of LGBTQ writers and producers in the creation of media, along with incorporating symbolism, themes, languages, lifestyles, and images that could be appreciated by the LGBTQ community. However, challenges are still present regardless of the years that passed. Fourth, Samantha Lee, director of the film Baka Bukas, once said it's good to have representation of different kinds of LGBT people on screen because when you see yourself on screen or when others see you on screen, it validates your existence in the real world. Finally, having LGBTQ media representation gives encouragement for groups to provide social support to help members feel belonged within a certain community, especially those who feel isolated because they're part of a minority, such as Asian Americans. These groups can be formed in many ways, like, again, as we mentioned, fandoms. It's advisable to be mindful of problematic LGBTQ representations that may potentially affect the mental well-being of certain LGBTQ members, such as negative portrayals of LGBT characters or groups, for example, those that are underrepresented in media. Instead, be more exposed to positive portrayals or give widespread suggestions towards media content that may help LGBTQ members discover their identity in a healthy pace. Personally, I think that having good representation in the media is really important, and I'm glad to see better portrayals in the media actually. As a part of the LGBTQ community myself, it's nice to see people who are just like me and go through similar struggles. Because of this, I would like to recommend to you some of my favorite queer shows, movies that I really enjoyed or that have helped me understand myself better. So the first one is Pose. It's a US based show. And by the way, most of these you can find on Netflix, except for one of them only, I think. Okay, yeah. So first is Pose. Next is Queer Eye. Citrus, it's an anime. Dark Blue Kiss. This is something you can find on YouTube only. I don't think they have it on Netflix yet. Together, as in together. Tarn Type and Sotus. No, Dark Blue Kiss, Together, Tarn Type, and Sotus are Thai films. Queer Eye is a Western reality film. Pose is also Western. Hello Stranger and Gaya sa Pelikula are both Tagalog BL movies. And all of these films are really, really good at showing what having better LGBT representation is compared to the stereotypical ones that we see on mainstream media. With all that being said, I hope that through this episode, all of you, our dear viewers, will have a better understanding on why LGBT representation is something worth talking about and taking into consideration, giving them a safe space through the media to express themselves and allowing them to have the same experience as everyone else in the world is a step towards having a more inclusive society. Comment any topic you would like us to tackle next and like and subscribe. Make sure to click the bell icon, by the way. Thank you for watching. Bye.